Good evening. Welcome to River Community Church. My name is Sam. I'm one of the pastors here. Thrilled to have you here with us tonight. I'm excited about tonight. I'm hopeful for tonight. It's going to be some fun. That was a pun. Serious hope. Great. You didn't get it yet, but you'll get it later. Nothing. Wow. Great. All right. So we're going to loosen up a little bit and have some fun. Thanks for being here. I'm excited about it, like I said, because I think it's going to be a really fun night. I think it's going to be an impactful night. I think it's going to be something that you all are going to be excited to leave here with later tonight. We're in this series right now we're calling Serious Hope. And it's the study of the book of Hebrews, and I think it's going to be some really solid stuff as we work through it this whole summer. Last week, Aaron opened it up, looking through chapters 1 and 2, and he talked about how we can have hope in Jesus even when life gets tough, because Jesus has been through it. He quoted this verse in Hebrews 2:18. It says, "Since he himself has gone through suffering and testing, he is able to help us when we are being tested." I feel like if we had just spent all the summer talking about that verse, that would be enough in and of itself. But alas, there's a whole lot more in Hebrews, so I'm excited to keep it going because I think there's some awesome hope there, but there's even more as we get through it. This week, we're going to talk about what it looks like when you feel like you're about to lose hope. Maybe you've been there, maybe you've been like right on the edge and you feel like, man, there's this hope that I've had in God. It's been there. It's been this thing that I've been wanting to have. And I've been living it, but it feels like I'm about to lose it. Maybe you felt like that at some point in your life. Or maybe on another note, maybe you've lost it in the past. Maybe there's been a time in your life, or maybe you're right there right now where you feel like you've lost that hope and you're just not sure what to do about it. You're not sure where to go, what direction you should go from there. And tonight we're going to talk about what those situations look like and what to do about them and how you can find that hope again and restore and strengthen that hope again. So before we get into all of that, would you guys take a moment and pray with me? Dear God, we are incredibly grateful that you love us and that you are a God that is a God we can hope in and trust in and look to when things are difficult and a struggle. Tonight, God, as we talk about this hope that we can have in you and maybe what happens when we feel like we're about to lose it, God, we ask that you would help us to have a much more significant hope, a bigger hope in you when we leave here tonight. I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. So, most of us, at some point in your life, have experienced this sort of story, this sort of situation. Kind of going through life, you're grinding through it, you're just enjoying yourself or working hard or maybe struggling a little bit, whatever it is, but maybe you're in school and you're doing your schoolwork, you're showing up every day, you're handing assignments in, you're doing the stuff, you're taking the tests, you're dealing with the social stuff, you're just going through life day in and day out. Maybe you're going to your job and it's the same job you've had for a while, and so you're punching your ticket, you're doing your thing for the 8 hours, 10 hours, 20 hours, it feels like a day that you're working there, and you're doing your job as you're there. Maybe you get home from that job and you're taking care of the house and the lawn and you're taking care of your kids and you're taking care of your family and just making sure everybody's doing all right and you're trying to make sure everybody's in a good spot. And then in the background of all of this, you've got this faith. You go to church on Saturday or Sunday and spend some time trying to follow God with it. It's not necessarily that it's in the background, but it's kind of just the foundation. It's this thing that you feel like is kind of been half guiding your life. And then you go back home on Sunday afternoon and you mow the grass, and then it grows that week, and then you mow it again, and you do your best to live this good life. And then something happens, right? Then something happens and it leaves you reeling, like grasping for something. You have a sickness that strikes. You have heartache. You have a job loss. Things don't go the way you planned. The basically sucky life stuff happens. It happens to everybody. To varying degrees, but we've all experienced it. And maybe if that stinky life stuff hasn't gotten you to that point, maybe it's something else. Maybe it's just the grind. It's the everyday in and out grind that just kind of gets to you. You're just feeling it, and you're exhausted, and you get to that place, and in that moment, you grasp for something to put your hope in, your trust in. And it's in that moment that you might just lose this hope you had in God. It's there, you've had it, but you're not sure if that's the thing you're going to place your hope in. anymore. Have you ever been there? Has that ever been you? Have you ever experienced a moment like that where you're not sure if this thing is really the thing you want to put your trust and hope in? This is exactly what's happening to the people that are receiving the letter Hebrews. Like, this is exactly what's happening to them. This is where they're at. They're at a place where they're at a crossroads and they have to decide, what are they going to hope in? Where are they going to place their hope? And so they're trying to figure that out. And the author of Hebrews is writing them, trying to encourage them to go a particular direction. And so this is where they're at. They're about to lose their hope. And the author of Hebrews is reminding them of something that has happened in the past. So here they are. They're this group of people that are like in a place and time, in this culture, and have a back history. And so he's reminding them of what's happened in their past. Not them, but like their ancestors. And so this letter, it's to this Jewish people. It's a group of Jewish people who have become followers of Jesus. So they grew up Jewish, going and basically reading what we would call the Old Testament, growing up, going to synagogue and doing these things. And then at one point in their life, they decide Jesus really is the Messiah and we're going to follow him, which puts them at odds with the Jewish tradition that they grew up in. They're a little bit different, significantly different, we would say, but they are now a different group of people. They've put themselves in a new context. And so the author of this letter is writing to them saying, hey, remember those ancestors you have? You're Jewish, you have these ancestors. He reminds them of their ancestors and this step of faith that they had taken when they were in Egypt. If you know the story, the Israelites, they're in Egypt, they're slaves, and they're struggling. They've got this heap of responsibilities placed on them, and it continues to get worse, and so they cry out to be delivered, and God sends Moses. And Moses shows up and basically with this crazy, wild story, leads the Israelites out of Egypt. Okay, you with me? Yeah, nod your heads? Yes? Okay, you're with me. Good. So he leads them out of Egypt. And as they're doing so, they're going to this place that God has promised them, this promised land. And there's a bunch of crazy stuff that happens along the way, but more or less they hold on to their faith as a group. And they get to the promised land. It's been tough, but they're getting there. And then something at this point happens. They'd gotten out of Egypt, through the wilderness, to the shores of the promised land, and something happens. They'd had this faith, they'd had this hope, and something happens. They lose their hope. They struggle. The odds seem suddenly stacked against them. This group of people that they're about to invade to take this land that's been promised to them by God, they seem too big, too strong, too powerful. And so they no longer remember the hope they've had or the things that God's already brought them to. And so with these reports that are coming in about who these people are, they get scared. They get afraid. They're fearful. They stop trusting the hope that they had in God. Fear in that moment got the best of them. In Hebrews, it actually describes this moment when it says this. It's in Hebrews 3, 7 through 9. It says, that is why the Holy Spirit says, today, when you hear his voice, don't harden your hearts as Israel did when they rebelled, when they tested me in the wilderness. There your ancestors tested and tried my patience, even though they saw my miracles for 40 years. So even though they've had this experience time and time again while they're in the wilderness and while they're on the shores of the promised land, they continue to test God and lose their hope in him. What's crazy about this is that the ancestors of the people who had received this letter had seen God do amazing things, like split a river in half and let them walk through on dry land. Like wild, insane things. They've been on the mountain and heard God's thundering voice. And yet, they wanted to go back to what they felt like they could trust in the past. They wanted to put their hope in something other than God, what they had once before. They spent 40 years in the wilderness because of it, and they did that instead of entering the promised land. And so the author of Hebrews, this author is warning the reader, don't do what they did. Don't do it. Don't go back to what you had in the past just because it looks more comfortable. Just because it looks like it might just be a little bit easier for a little while. The truth is, the comfort, it's not going to last. And the easiness, it might be easier for a day or two, or maybe even a week or a month, but eventually it'll stop being easier. He says, keep the hope. Keep trusting Jesus. Now, to understand this a little further, it's important to know something else. So we just talked about Moses leading this group of people out of Egypt. Moses was a big deal. The people this letter is written to, they had come in the tradition, they had grown up in this tradition where Moses is the guy. Like, he led Israel out of Egypt. There's so much good that happened there, and all these writings that he writes down that comes from God. What Moses wrote is like as high as it gets. Moses is the guy. He's held in hugely high respect. He's very much esteemed. It's Moses. And so Moses is the guy. So the people that he's writing to, they're considering going back to their old Jewish ways, going back to what they did before with all the old buddies in the synagogue and learning about what Moses taught and trusting him as the leader of their faith. And it just looked so much more comfortable. It looked like it'd be easier to just go back to the way things used to be. So the question then for these people that are being written to, the question for them is, well, we've heard this Messiah, Jesus, well, why Jesus? Why Jesus? Not Moses. I mean, what's the difference? Why should we look to Jesus and not someone else? What's up with Jesus? Let me tell you why. A number of years ago, between summers and college, I had a job, and that job was in a bike shop over in Oshkosh. And so I go there during the summers for whatever number of hours per week, and I'd be working there, and it's a fun place to work. I mean, you get to work with bikes, and you get to talk to people about bike racing, and that was something I used to do. So it was a really fun place for me to work. But there's always this one thing that kind of irked me. Somebody would come in, and this happened, it felt like every week, almost every day, but it was like every week probably if I'm being reasonable. But people would come into the shop, okay? And when you come into the shop, like the good business person that I was trying to be, you like go and greet them right away. And you say, hey, how's it going? It makes them feel comfortable. You want to say, hey, is there anything I can help you with? Are you looking for anything in particular? I'm trying to, be a good salesman. Like, that's what you're supposed to do. Just in case you ever get into sales, you should make them feel comfortable. It's a good idea, all right? Good. So you do that, and you go up to them, and without fail, there is this one particular thing that happens. The person would go ahead and ask me, hey, is Dan available? And whether Dan was available or not, like if he was in back, he probably didn't want to be bugged, so I'd say, no, he's not available right now. Or if he was out of the place, I'd just say he's not there. But if he's like in the sight, like I'd point him to him. But if he wasn't available, something would almost always happen. The person would look at me like, okay, and do this, and head out the door. Like, they just literally walk out of the door. Like, if Dan's not there, I'm not coming in. I'm not talking about anything. I don't want to be there. And frankly, it really offended me. Okay? I know a lot about bikes. I raced them for a dozen years. I did a lot of research on them. I knew all the best parts. I knew all the best things to do. I was okay at fixing them, but that wasn't my job in that situation. I just needed to find them the best stuff, and I could do that. I knew I was good at that. So I was offended. Why don't you want to talk to me? I'm a nice guy. I promise. Like, what's the deal? Now, years later, I look back on that and laugh a little bit because I've realized something. They weren't really trying to offend me. They were just really smart, okay? They were really smart because Dan was the person in charge at the store. He ran the store. And Dan could do something for them that I couldn't. Dan could get them cheaper prices on things than I could, okay? So they'd walk in. If Dan's not there, they're not getting the price they want, so they don't even want to talk to me. And so they come in, and there's a big distinguishing thing, right? I had all the knowledge. I had all the know-how. I knew all about bikes. I could get them what they needed. I could go in the computer, order the parts, whatever. I could do it, except I was missing one very key ingredient. I did not have the authority that Dan had. Dan had the authority. He could do whatever he wanted. He could sell them for less than cost if he wanted to. And so if you're going to buy something, whether it's a bike or an auto place or wherever, talk to the guy who has the authority or the person who has the authority. There's some advice for you. I now do that. I didn't like that they did that before, but that's just the way it works. That's actually kind of how it is with Jesus and Moses. And that's the exact point Hebrews makes next. Here it is. It says, "And so, dear brothers and sisters who belong to God and are partners with those called to heaven, think carefully about this Jesus, whom we declare to be God's messenger and high priest. For he was faithful to God who appointed him, just as Moses served faithfully when he was entrusted with God's entire house." And this is a but, right? This is a big important thing. But Jesus deserves far more glory than Moses, just as a person who builds a house deserves more praise than the house itself. For every house has a builder, but the one who built everything is God. Moses was certainly faithful in God's house as a servant. His work was an illustration of the truths God would reveal later. But Christ, as the Son, Jesus we're talking about here, is in charge of God's entire house. And we are God's house if we keep our courage and remain confident in our hope in Christ. Hebrews is basically saying this: Jesus is greater than Moses. So for you students here today, I've been so excited to tell you this. There's a greater than sign. Does anybody know what the greater than sign is? Here's how you know what is greater than. It's an alligator eating the bigger thing, okay? See, it's an alligator, big mouth, and the alligator eats the bigger thing because it's hungry. Now you will never forget it, okay? Because in school, I always couldn't remember which is which. Did anybody learn that too? Yes, I was hoping a few of you did. I was pretty excited about that. But this is the case, right? The better thing, the bigger thing, the more important thing is Jesus. Jesus is greater than Moses. Moses is great. Moses did an amazing thing. He was a faithful servant, but still, Jesus is greater than Moses. The people that the author of Hebrews was writing to, they're tempted in this moment to go back to following Moses. It felt safer. But the point he's making is, it's not better. It's not better. It's not a better bet. You want the person who made the house, not the person who's just taking care of it. Back in chapter 1, what Aaron was talking about last week, the author says it straight away. Jesus was there when it was all created. It says this in Hebrews 1, 2 through 3. "And now in these final days, he has spoken to us through his Son. God promised everything to the Son as an inheritance, and through the Son, he created the universe. The Son radiates God's own glory and expresses the very character of God, and he sustains everything by the mighty power of his command. When he had cleansed us from our sin, he sat down in the place of honor at the right hand of the majestic God in heaven." Jesus is greater than Moses, and he was since the beginning. Jesus has the authority over this world that no one else and no other thing possesses. He's greater. The people receiving this letter, they're ready to lose their hope. They're on that verge. Life was hard. They were scared. Persecution was probably getting worse. They wanted to fall back on their old ways. We've all been there. We've all struggled. And what are you tempted to fall back on when life gets hard? There's all kinds of stuff. You get to that day and you grasp for something to hope in, and maybe it served you well in the past, so it'd just be so easy to just go right back to it. So maybe without even realizing in that moment, you start losing this hope that you had in Jesus, and you start grasping for that other thing again, and maybe you cling to your job because that's where it feels like you're valued. You go there and you show up and people call you sir or ma'am, and they treat you with respect, and you do good work, and so you feel like you have some respect there, and it's good. Maybe it's in your appearance, right? You start working on yourself for a little while, and you maybe join a gym or whatever else and take some better care of yourself, and all of a sudden you're seeing your appearance take some dividends or pay some dividends. And so you start relying on that as the thing that's gonna get you somewhere. You hope that your appearance is what'll work, or maybe it's your network of friends, right? As long as I got these people, I got my network. If I can call somebody up and have them do something for me, I'm gonna be fine. It'll be great. I put my hope in my network. Or maybe it's not a network. Maybe it's just that one. We've had that maybe before, like in your life, where you have that one person, you know, if I can call them, they will be here in 2 seconds, and I know they'll help me. And so you put your hope in that friend. Or maybe it's a pocketbook. Maybe you're feeling fine with the money thing, and so as long as I got that pocketbook going for me and I can write the check when I need to, I'll be fine. I put my hope and my money to make it happen for me. We've all done it. We all do it. We do this thing where we start to layer this stuff on top of these areas of our life that we put our hope in, and it's like we're just building this foundation, and we've got all these pieces, and we feel like as long as those things are in place, everything's going to be okay. And as we do that, we start to try really hard to rely on this stuff, and pieces start to fall out, and they can't bear it. It's like we're playing Jenga with our life, kind of like this. Check it out. And I know that's a little bit of a silly illustration, but how true is it, right? You got these blocks that make up our life, and we start to think that they're what provide us with safety. We can put our hope and trust in these things, and suddenly you do that and one of them slips out. This is the first one to go, and it's no big deal because you figure something's going to happen in life, but then another one does. And you feel like you're putting more weight on these other pieces, and you start pulling those pieces out, and they all start to fall out, and then you're balancing on this rickety, crazy thing of a life, and you're thinking that these one couple of things, one or two couple of things are going to hold all together, and it crashes. And the point still stands. Jesus is greater than Moses. He's the builder of the house, not the person just taking care of it for a time. Jesus is greater than your job. Jesus gave you the skill set and the ability to have the job you have. It's not the thing that's going to be there. You could lose it tomorrow. It could happen. Who knows what will happen in the future, but Jesus is greater than it. He's more worthy of your hope than it. Jesus is greater than your appearance. No matter how great you look, it's not the thing that's going to be worth your hope. Jesus is greater than that friend, and as good as your friend could be. I mean, they could be utterly amazing, always there, always willing to stand up for you, always willing to do that thing. They're not going to be perfect, and it's wrong to expect them to be. They're going to fail you. Don't put your hope in them like you put your hope in Jesus. Jesus is greater than your finances. There's no amount of money that will bring you happiness. No amount of money that will make life as meaningful as you want it to be. It's just not possible, so don't put your hope there. Jesus is greater than whatever your thing is, your fix, whatever. Whatever your thing is, Jesus is greater than it. We called this series Serious Hope because that's what this book of Hebrews is all about. It shows us that our only serious hope, the only serious hope that we've got is in Jesus. That's it. It's the real one. Only He has the authority. And I'm not going to trust the employee. I'm not going to trust the person who just works there. I'm going to trust the boss. I'm not going to trust the person looking after the house. I'm going to trust and hope in the builder and owner and sustainer of the house. That's who I'm going to trust. That's who I'm going to put my hope in. The author of Hebrews uses one particular word 3 times in chapter 3 and then 8 times throughout the book. He's a bit fond of the word. That word is this. It's today. Today. In verse 13, he uses it and says, "You must warn each other every day while it is still today, so that none of you will be deceived by sin and hardened against God." Let me ask you, today, where's your hope at? How's it doing? Have you lost it? Has it been gone for a while? Has it been missing from your life? And what have you been putting your hope in instead? Because it's going to be something. How's that working out for you? My fear for you is that you're going to live a life that's constantly disappointed in what you're putting your hope in, because it just won't ever live up to what you think it should be. It's not going to amount to what you hoped it would be. You put your hope there, but it's not enough, and it falls short, and so you're going to live a life with constant disappointment. If that's you, if you're there and you feel like you've lost hope and you're wondering, what in the world can I do? I'm feeling like I'm swirling in life, grasping for something. I need something to hold on to. Hear these words from Hebrews. It says this: remember what it says. Today, when you hear his voice, don't harden your hearts, as Israel did when they rebelled. I don't know why you did that. I don't know why you lost your hope. At some point, I'm guessing, just grew distant, and you didn't have it as part of your everyday life, and you started to think of it as smaller than it really was, and you grew kind of hard and coarse toward it because things happen in life, and you maybe blamed God for it. So you hardened your heart. So I don't know why exactly that happened, but if you want to have some hope again, allow yourself to soften for a moment. Put the defenses down. Give him a chance. Let God lead for a while in your life again and see where he leads. And I promise that as you let those defenses down and let him lead again, you won't be sorry you did it. Be hope in your life again. That's pretty powerful, I think. Maybe you haven't lost it. Maybe you're here tonight and you just feel like you're about to. And you're just right on the edge, and you've been trying to figure this thing out for a while, and you're trying to figure out how to follow God, and so you're right there. What do you do then? To me, the most powerful thing you can do is remember exactly what it is that you're hoping for, why you put your hope there in the first place. In Hebrews 3:14, it says, "For if we are faithful to the end, trusting God just as firmly as when we first believed, we will share in all that belongs to Christ." When we hold on to this hope, it says we will share in everything that belongs to Jesus. Everything. Let that sink in for just a moment, okay? Like, that's a lot. That's a big deal. Nothing else in your life can promise that. Not your job, not your marriage, not your finances, not that friend. Nothing can promise that. But God can. That's a big hope. It's a big deal. Compare that to what everything else in your life offers and think for a moment, just how big is this hope in Jesus? For now, for the future, for eternity, it's a lot. And then add to that, for just a moment, when you look back at your life, what's changed? Like, from that moment that you began following Jesus, before that, where were you at? How was life going? What was happening? Maybe there's some struggles and you didn't know where to turn, who to trust. Maybe you were wrapped up in some stuff that just didn't feel good and you hadn't let it go. And then all of a sudden you trust Jesus and you start following them. What's happened since then? I am very good at forgetting. But when you take a moment to remember, it blows you away at the things God's done for you, the circumstances he's changed, and who he's made you to be most of all. Because when I look back at that person I used to be, I don't like that person very much. The person was insecure, not kind, and selfish. And I'm not saying I'm a perfect version of that now, because I'm not even close, but I'm not where I was. I like this person a whole lot more than I like that person. And Jesus has done that, not me. And that's a hope I can hold on to, that memory of that change. And I think that's powerful. Maybe you're here tonight and you feel like you're solid, and that's outstanding. That's what I hope for all of us. That'd be great. But I do have one suggestion for you. If that's you, and you've got this hope and it's solid for you, I guarantee you know somebody who doesn't. And someone who's struggling and who's looking for it and wanting and desperate for it, but they just don't know it. They just don't know what the hope is. And you are the person who has experienced a life that's been changed by this hope, and all you got to do is share that. You don't need the 5-step plan to becoming a Christian and changing your life perfectly. You need your own story and what happened to you, and they can figure it out pretty well from that. They can see who Jesus is and how he's changed you, and you can share that hope. And that's some profound stuff. About 9 years ago, I was planning and getting ready to propose to my now wife at the end of the summer. So I was getting everything set. Okay? And it was this thing that I was excited about. I couldn't wait. I had all these hopes and dreams for our lives together. I couldn't believe that I was going to actually be able to marry this woman. She was amazing. I couldn't wait. She was gone for the summer, and I was waiting for her to come back and making all the preparations, jumping through hoops, figuring out how to do it the right way, making sure it was special and memorable. All those things you're apparently supposed to do when you ask someone to marry you. And so I was doing that stuff. And it was because I had high hopes, huge hopes for our life together. And I'll be honest, I think we've met so many and surpassed so many of those hopes, but it's also been the hardest, best thing in my life. A good marriage is hard and it's amazing. It's difficult and tough, but it's also worth it and surpasses your hopes in ways you never thought it would. I went through all those hoops, all those things, trying to figure that out because I had high hopes. But here's the thing. That hope doesn't even come close to the hope I have in Jesus. And it shouldn't. It shouldn't. The hope I have for my relationship with Jesus should be higher than anything else. And it is. How big is your hope in Jesus? How big is it? Because it should be bigger than that. It should be bigger than any other thing that you have. It should be bigger hope for now. It should be bigger hope for the future. It should be bigger hope for eternity. Because if you're struggling to hang on to that hope, maybe, just maybe, your hope just isn't big enough and you haven't grasped just how amazing this relationship is with Jesus and just exactly how fantastic his promises are. Which is why, by the way, you should be here next weekend, because next weekend we jump to chapter 4 if you want to read ahead. But in chapter 4, we start to look at the amazing promise that Jesus gives, the hope that he presents, and a thorough look at just how fantastic it is. So if you're looking to expand and make bigger your hope, you should be here next weekend, because that's exactly what we're going to talk about, and I think it's going to be amazing. We'll talk about eternity, we'll talk about heaven, we'll talk about what Jesus promises here and now and in the future. All of these things we'll talk about, and I think it'll make you excited about life again and filled with hope again. So be here for that next weekend. But with that said, I'm going to finish up here with a prayer. And that prayer is going to be in 2 parts. The first part is that if you're here and you've lost hope, I'm going to pray that we would be able to soften and let our defenses down and let God lead again. And second, I'm going to pray for a bigger hope, that we would see and conceive and see a picture of just how big of a hope Jesus is. And that would make a difference in our everyday life. If you want that, would you pray those words with me now? Dear God, we are so incredibly grateful for you. But sometimes we come to points in our lives where we feel like we're going to lose hope, or maybe we have. And we went to hoping in other things again. Tonight, God, We ask that you'd soften our hearts, that we'd let the defenses down again and let you lead, that we'd remember just how good of a leader you are, just how much greater you are than Moses or our job or any other thing. And then, God, for those of us who have this hope, but maybe we're just kind of clinging to it, or maybe we want to see it even a bigger way, help us to have the biggest hope we can. Show us just how amazing it is to follow your Son, Jesus. Pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.